Hello, everyone. This is Jason White, and welcome to our 13th ISO podcast. After a long hiatus, we are back, and we're ready to kick things off with a very special guest. This gentleman is the 1977 British Formula 3 champion, a former Formula 1 IndyCar and IMSA driver, a two-time winner of the 12 Hours of Sebring, and he's an accomplished TV color commentator. In recent years, he's become a public speaker, helping companies and organizations to see how extraordinary race team behaviors can generate success in other team situations. His most recent book is entitled A Champion's Path, Race Team Tactics for Business. And by the way, he's also the father of a current IndyCar driver by the name of Connor. We're thrilled to have him with us today, and we're looking forward to his insights. Please welcome to the podcast, Derek Daly. Derek, thanks so much for making the time for us. We really appreciate it.
Jason, my pleasure. How are you? I like your shirt.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I got it at Indy this May. Which was a really fun event this year. Very exciting. Were you there for the race yourself? Or?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, headphones on, just listening to Connor's radio and the TV broadcast, up on top of the grandstands above the old F1 suites.
Oh wow.
By myself. Don't bother me, don't talk to me, don't show me. I just get engrossed in my own little world as that race goes on.
Yeah, it really is such a unique event in the world of motorsports. Nothing compares to it in terms of scope and spectacle.
Yeah.
So other than that, how's your summer been going? I'm assuming that you've been traveling, doing speaking engagements, things of that nature.
Yeah. I don't do many in the summertime because conferences are usually at the end and the start of the year. So all the sunshine states have a lot of the conferences from the winter states all moved down there. So I've spent quite a bit of time in Indianapolis. I'm in Arizona now. I also have a home in Indianapolis. So I spent a good chunk of the summer there. There's a whole group of us like to ride jet skis every Tuesday on the lake north of Indy. So I try and stay up with the young kids doing that stuff. And Arizona, quite frankly, is the temperature is horrendous in the summertime. I mean, it was 118 when we left 4 weeks ago. I mean, it's just obsessive. Oppressive. But
as they say, it's a dry heat.
Well, they did say that, but it's not. And believe it or not, there's a very uncomfortable humidity in Arizona these days for whatever reason. I don't know why. I mean, nature adjusts and climate changes, but it's no longer the dry heat they thought it was.
Interesting. Well, one of the main reasons we wanted to talk to you is because you're a guy that clearly embraces the idea of reinventing yourself throughout your life.
Yeah, and believe it or not, it wasn't through planning. Almost everything I do is almost reactive. It's the next thing around the corner. And that includes careers. I had never planned, never thought about, never discussed with anybody that I may do television broadcasting after my racing career. I literally fell into it by accident, my own IndyCar accident, because during my recovery period, I got hurt in September. About 6 weeks later, the last IndyCar race of the season was in Las Vegas. And I did an interview with ESPN that turned into a 10-year contract. A week or two after the interview, I got a call from the ESPN, said, would you like to do color, while you're in recuperation? I said, sure. And at that stage, when I said, sure, Jason, I had absolutely no idea what I just agreed to. Never heard the term before. I wasn't familiar with American television vernacular. I didn't know what a color commentator was, but suddenly they were going to pay me to talk about racing while I'm in recuperation. So I said, sure. I had no formal training. I just literally jumped into it. And I had a couple of, I suppose, mentors, because Terry Lingner lived and worked in Indianapolis. Lingner Group Productions provided a lot of the content for ESPN. They were based in Indianapolis. So Terry became my mentor, said, hey, this is the way to do this. And he always said to me, he says, very few drivers can talk, listen, and think all at the same time. because while you're talking about what's on the screen, you're thinking about the next stuff and you're listening to what the producer wants you to do and where you want him to go. And so that was a skill set that I mastered fairly quickly. And so while I'm in recuperation, I started a second career. Then I got back to full-time racing and had a television career at the same time. So when I wanted to stop in 91, I already had a second career and I loved it. I got the same buzz, Jason, from doing a live television broadcast as I did behind the wheel of the race car. I could feel that heartbeat begin to pound, that tingle, that, you know, that nervous energy. So I loved doing it. And I think the Irish storyteller in me allowed me to sort of bring the audience, paint the picture for them. And I got on very well with it. I just loved it. My television career went on for like 24 years after my racing career.
Yeah, I mean, storytelling definitely is the way I would describe the way that you call a race, because you have a really good, one of the things that a color commentator definitely has to do is fill in the blanks, you know, and give experiential, you know, input of what's going on. And you were very good at that. And jumping a little ahead, you were one place that I really thought you were excellent was during Bubble Day in Indianapolis. You were really good at conveying the pressure and the intensity of that uniquely Indianapolis situation. Very Byzantine process.
And it was unique. And I think I was able to describe it and bring the audience into the pit lane, if you like, because I was there. I was on the bubble. I was knocked out of the Indy 500 in '86. And so I just knew the magnitude of what happens. And I wanted to bring the audience into the pit lane, stand beside me here. This is what's going on here. And, you know, there's dire consequences to missing a race like that. So you have to sort of, you know, explain it in detail, the consequences of what you're now watching, what's unfolding here. Great teams like Penske, great drivers like Bobby Rahal, you know, on Bubble Day. And of course, the Irish accent of Bubble Day, I would play that up a little bit. But it was an exciting broadcast to be involved in as you brought people into the storyline. Yeah, I loved it. It was great.
Yeah, one of the things that is often said about Bubble Day, compared to the guys who qualify up front, they have a comparatively easier time. Well, qualifying in Indy is never easy, but their cars are usually state of the art, set up very, very well, and are quick, and therefore don't take nearly as much effort as some of these guys at the back of the field have to do to get their 2 or 3 old race car into the race. I mean, they take more risks at the back than most people realize, and you were able to convey some of that.
And it's hair raising. Mm-hmm. And the reason they're at the back, because the car doesn't handle well. And when a car doesn't handle well and you're forced to go into that danger zone, your heartbeat has to pound in your chest. The adrenaline has to try and keep everything under control. But make no mistake about it, you are on the verge of crashing, just trying to make the field. And I mean, they were great storylines. And as it happened, ESPN, during my tenure there, did a live show from the pit lane. Myself and Paul Page were in the pit lane, literally standing in the pit lane, to do the last hour of each day leading up to qualifying. So we had the unique position of having access to every team, every driver, every lap, every piece of video, all the scuttle, and you know, we had the pleasure of being the ones to bring that storyline to life, and it was great stuff. I mean, people still enjoy it. I still see the video pop up on social media, you know, of some of the calls that we made, whether it was Willie T. Ribbs. I mean, that was an amazing story when Willie T. Ribbs, on his very last run, having blown up every engine he had, finally got to a speed that he'd never been before. And so he was in a zone he'd never been to before. And could he survive, or was it going to beat him? And they were great storylines. They were great stuff.
Yeah. No, I remember that one specifically from when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, he didn't last very long on race day, but
right,
but he had broken that barrier, and it was a
it was
really
history.
fast.
We all watched history.
It was history for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as many changes as you've made in your career, everybody starts somewhere. And I was doing some research on you, and I was really surprised to learn that one of your earliest experiences driving a racing car was back doing dirt tracks. And you won a championship in 1972. And what was that? Was like oval dirt track racing, or was it dirt track road racing? What was it? What type of format was that?
No, little short track dirt oval. I was 16 years old. Saw a poster on a street sign somewhere in Dublin. Stock car racing, they called it over there, at a place called Santry Stadium. And I asked my dad if he'd take me out to see it, which he did. And I was just mesmerized at these complete junkers crashing into each other and rubbing off each other. And I thought, I want to do it. The reason I wanted to do it is because when I was 12 years of age, I saw my very first race car. It was a Brabham BT8 in our neighborhood. My dad sold vegetables out of a corner grocery store. And the lady who bought her groceries, her brother had this Brabham, and he let me see it. And it was a big deal for me. And I touched it. Very first racing guy I ever touched. And my dad said, I'll take you to see it race the next day. I was 12 years of age. We went to a small village in the outskirts of Dublin City called Dunboyne. We sat on the grass bank. Cars whizzed by. Now, there was no safety fence. There was nothing. You literally could sit on the grass bank, and these things would whiz by. And that day was when I said to my dad, I'm going to be a professional race car driver. And the only way I could start was when I was 16, I could actually buy one of these old junkers and race on dirt. Now, remember, we couldn't get driver's licenses in Ireland till we were 18. So I was going to depend on my dad to tow this thing on the end of a rope across the city every Sunday to this little dirt track and start racing. And it was very humble beginnings, very basic, but that was where I started. And I'm still doing wild stuff.
Well, and of course, later on, you went on to be the British Formula 3 champion, and that was followed by seasons in European Formula 2 and ultimately your elevation to Formula 1. What was that progression like?
Yeah, so I mean, it's very much the same as it is today. There's junior support series for Formula 1. It used to be called GP3, GP2, and then F1. Now they've gone back to the Formula 3, Formula 2, Formula 1 is back using those names again. But the British Formula 3 championship was regarded as the toughest in the world. Everybody came to England to race. People like Nelson Piquet based themselves in England to race that same year. And if you were successful in the British F3 championship, people took notice. And I went there with one of the smallest teams, one mechanic, and managed to win the championship. And midway through the season was the British Grand Prix. And I got into a big dust-up with a British driver called Stephen South. And there we were, both trying to impress team managers. And I was leading and doing my best to keep him behind. We ended up touching wheels. He crashed upside down. I flew off into the grass. I was in tears when I went to my sponsor, my mentor at the time, and said, look, I can win these races. We have to go to the next Formula 1 support race, wherever it is. It happened to be in Austria a month or so later. I go there. Nelson Piquet is there. I qualify in the pole beside Nelson Piquet. I'm sitting on the grid, and an older gentleman with a bit of a shuffle and a limp walks across the front of my car, speaks to my sponsor, my mentor, Derek McMahon, Big Derek, we called him. He was a very large man. he comes over into the cockpit. He said, that fella there said, if you win this race, he'd put you in a Formula One car by the end of the year. I said, who was it? He said, it was a fella called Sidney Taylor, who was the guy in my neighborhood when I was 12 years of age, who had the Brabham BT8, the first racing guy I ever saw and touched.
Wow.
And so how it all came full circle. Sidney Taylor was then managing the investment of Teddy Yip, Theodore Racing, in Formula One. They just built a new Formula One car. And I went out against PK. We had a barnstormer of a race. I won it. And 6 weeks later, I went back to England, won the next 5 races in the championship in England, won the championship. And I was testing a Formula One car at Goodwood 13 months after I won the Formula Ford Festival in England. So things happen just amazingly fast, just incredible stuff.
Yeah, and I think it illustrates also how small the business is of racing.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody knows each other. But I think the key is if you can put yourself in a position to take advantage of the opportunities that come your way, then it leads to the next advantage, the next opportunity. And so I do a lot of keynote speaking, as you know now, and people ask, well, how does it happen? And people say, oh, well, someone opened the door for you. Well, the door can be opened by somebody, but you have to walk through the door yourself. And you have to do something as you walk through the door for somebody to recognize and open another door for you. It's a cumulative set of steps in life that you keep having the challenge to make stuff happen. And I was able to do that all the way through my early career, even though I didn't come from any financing. We had no automotive background or racing background. My dad knew nothing about racing and never financed my career with one penny through my whole career. But I was just able to take advantage of the steps that were offered to me along the way.
Well, a lot of it is, I think it was Seneca that said, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity.
Right.
And that's, you see that happen so often in people's professional lives and definitely in motor racing for sure.
Yeah. And as Roger Penske says, effort equals results. Mm-hmm. If you don't put the effort in, you don't get the result. And I say mediocre effort equals mediocre results.
Yeah.
That big effort equals the big results. And so, people, even now, I see young drivers today who, ask me because of the Race to Win, the book that I wrote about driver development. Well, how do I do this? And how do I do that? And, I gave up racing because I couldn't get a sponsor. Well, sometimes you give up racing because you give up. And all that was a mental test to see, did you have the fortitude to push through? Because this is not an easy sport. This will challenge you physically, mentally, and intellectually every single day. And I love that about the sport because you can't hide anything. And I love to be able to bring those type of high performance principles into corporate America today, because I don't know a sports platform as powerful as motorsports. And I often follow NFL players. NFL is big in America, but I say to people, I live still in Indianapolis, and for 14 years we had Peyton Manning in Indianapolis, who was renowned for what? Meticulous preparation. And I said, okay, so imagine this. What if he slacked off one weekend? What if he didn't prepare well? What if he went out and he made a mistake and he threw a bad pass? What would he lose? A down. The very worst, he'd lose a game. In our business at the Indy 500, you make a mistake at 230 miles an hour, it's a lot more dire consequences. So you see how the principles are just so sharp and so unique. And it's a great platform to draw people in, because nothing gives me a bigger thrill today than using our sports platform to influence corporate America on how to behave and how to get better internally.
And what was it initially that inspired you to make the connection between extraordinary race teams and other businesses? Where did that idea come from?
From Desiree Wilson.
Really?
You remember Desiree Wilson?
Yes, I do. Yes.
South African, the most impressive female I'd ever seen in a racing car. And in 1983, she was my teammate at Indianapolis at Weissard, who gave her a terrible car. She didn't have a chance to qualify. And during one of the practice sessions, she was asked to go and do a lunchtime speech at the old Indianapolis motel. She was so nervous, she asked me, would I go along for moral support? I said, sure, I would. So she goes over to the lunch, she gets up and she's on the microphone. She says, I'm from South Africa. My dad bought a go-kart. We bought a van. We had tires. We did this. We traveled here. We traveled there. And as she's talking there, I'm thinking, well, my story is better than that. And I had never spoken to anybody. I wouldn't say boo to a goose. I was a shy boy from Dublin, and I wouldn't do anything like that. And she got a rousing round of applause. And the MC looked to me and says, Derek, would you like to say anything? And I thought, yes, I would. I got up, gave a little bit of a spiel, got a round of applause, and something, Jason, in the back of my head said, you can do this. This is interesting. And then I got another invitation to speak at a lunch. And then somebody said, we'll pay you to speak at our lunch. Pay me? What? And I did that for a couple of years. And then I had a speaking bureau said, we'd like to represent you to speak. What? What do you mean? I knew nothing about it. Yeah, we'll pay you thousands of dollars to speak. What? And so I tripped over another career using storylines that to me weren't that impressive, but when you relay them to other people, they were in awe of what I did and how I did it and how you overcome difficult days. Like I was almost killed in 1984. So I thought, well, you know, I recover and I get on and do the best I can. I didn't realize the lesson that there was in how you mentally tackle the rest of your career after almost being killed. And when I put that together, people wanted to understand it, wanted to pay me. And I realized, hey, I've got storylines here about a sport that stretches people to the edges of what might be possible. And there could be a whole other career. And think of the joy I'd have just using the sports platform to influence America. And so it literally happened by accident. But the key to my keynote speaking, Jason, and I really haven't told many people about this, when remember Speed Vision?
Yes.
Television? Okay, so I was employed by Speed Vision. My executive producer from ESPN moved to Speed Vision. I went with him because I really admired how he did it and how he coached me. So I went with him. Then Fox, Speed Channel, bought Speed Vision. Well, Fox at the same time bought the NFL. And they lost so much money at the NFL, they were siphoning off all the profits from every other sport to fund the NFL. I completely understand why they did it. I was graciously offered a 40% cut in salary. And I thought, you know what, this doesn't sound right to me. But the final straw was I would do a track test every year, one track test. It happened by accident. We were covering Michael Andretti at McLaren when he was with a Senna's teammate. Myself and Bob Varsha traveled around the world looking at Michael. And that was the year that Alain Prost won the championship in the Williams. Remember the Ep013 Williams, the all-active car?
Yes.
That got banned by the FIA. Well, I said to Frank Williams in the middle of the pit lane one day, hey, before this thing gets mothballed, I'd love to have a run in it. I hadn't driven a Formula One car. I hadn't seen one for 12 years. And Frank said, nah, let me think about it. 6 weeks later, I got a call, meet us in Paul Ricard in first weekend in November, you can drive the car. I got there, did a test in the car. It was amazing. So every year I would do one test. I did stock cars. I did Alonso Jr.'s Penske. I did Honda, Tasman Honda. I did all sorts of great stuff. But the very last one was the Jordan Formula One car at Silverstone. And so instead of just writing a story, I wanted to do a television documentary. I wanted to take a television crew with me, which I did. The only one that didn't get paid for it was me.
Oh.
Everybody else got paid. And I thought, Speed Vision, Speed Channel, if that's all they think of the access I can provide to current day Formula One cars, this was 2005, I thought it's time for me to move on. So that soured me so much on television. I just said, I'm gonna now put a big effort into my keynote speaking. And I did. I reverted all my work effort into keynote speaking, websites, marketing, all that sort of stuff. And ironically, I was paid more to go back to ESPN to speak to their sales staff than I was for the weekend doing television broadcasting. So it was all these things work out in the end. But you see how the whole changeover soured me, and it was time to move on. And I'm thrilled that I moved on because of the next career that I had, because it was such satisfaction to keynote speaking and influencing corporate America with the same sports platform.
That's fantastic. Thanks for giving us the background on that, because you always wonder, as a person moves from one career to another, how it happens.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting story behind that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you've talked a lot just now about cars that you've driven, and maybe just it's time for a very specific and very simple question. When you look back over your career, both, being a commentator and as a driver, what was your favorite car that you drove and why?
I'd say my favorite racing car was the Chevron Formula 2 car that I raced in 1978. And I won the 5th and 6th round of the European Formula 2 Championship in the car at Mugello and Vallelunga in Italy. And what was great about this car is you could absolutely drive the shit out of it. It was back in the day when the harder you drove, the faster you went. And this Chevron, you could do anything with it. You could hit any curve. You could brake late, make a mistake, and still correct it. It just gave the driver the feel that I was completely invincible. Now, it wasn't the fastest Formula 2 car at the time. The March BMW was actually a faster car, but I could still win races just because of the types of things you could do with this car. Now, my favorite Formula 1 car would be the 1980 Tyrrell. Again, it wasn't the fastest car on the grid, but it was a great handling car at times. You just knew where it was. It felt good. Now, the Ferraris were faster. The Ligier was faster at the time, but it was a great feel. You felt like you were driving a great Formula 1 car at the time.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Why don't we talk for a minute about current developments in IndyCar racing? Because you have this great new career in public speaking, but there's often times where I'm watching a race and I'll say to myself, I wonder what Derek would think about this. Like, for example, there's been a lot of stuff going on in IndyCar. Like, for example, the Arrow McLaren team, they may as well install a revolving door on car number 6. There's so many people that they've had go through there, and just this year they've had like 3 driver changes. No, actually 4, not one of their own making because of Rossi's accident in Toronto. And they're already committed to another driver change in 2025. Now, you studied race teams. You studied what makes race teams successful and exceptional. Mm-hmm. In your opinion, can a team that has this much instability at the driver level still build a team culture of success? And if so, how do they do it?
No.
The answer is no.
Yeah. Now, it doesn't mean they're not going to change it. I believe they will. I've known Zach Brown for many, many, many years. I was doing television commentary when he was a driver in a Porsche 911 Turbo. So I've known him. I've known his success. I admire so much about him. So he knows it's unstable. And he knows how to turn it around. I'm just surprised. I'm surprised that they have taken a gunslinger approach to their IndyCar program. It's a bit of a shoot from the hip situation. I don't really know what happened to Lucas. Makes no sense. Why they got rid of him under those circumstances. It doesn't make any sense to me why they got rid of Alex Rossi. But now remember, we don't know the inside to what's going on. But it is historically unstable. And if you look at their performance on track, it mirrors it. They're unstable and all over the place on the racetrack. There is no doubt Pato O'Ward is one of the fastest racing drivers in IndyCar, without a doubt. Now, a driver like that's instinct reflex. There are two types of drivers, instant reflex and feel sensitive. Instant reflex is Pato O'Ward, Juan Montoya, Tony Kanaan, Kimi Räikkönen, those brilliant nerve endings on fire type drivers that'll drive the car as fast as it can possibly go. But they need a lot of engineering support to make sure you give them a car that's able to win. The field sensitive guys are Gilles de Ferran, Dario Franchitti, Alan Prost, the thinking guys, right? So they're able to think through what the car needs. So O'Ward is instant reflex. You got to give him an awful lot of support. You got to put guardrails around him to harness that speed and teach him the understanding of what it takes to become a professional racing driver at the highest levels, where you have consistency and reliability and speed. And I don't think they have that for him yet. I just don't think they have it for him yet. So they're all over the place. I believe Zach Brown will make the decisions eventually to sort it out. But I am surprised it's as unstable at this time as it is.
Mm-hmm. Considering how much money there is at stake and the name that's on the car, quite frankly, you know.
But Jason, remember, I'm surprised how bad Penske does sometimes. How can Team Penske not roll up and dominate every single race? With the resources they have, it makes no sense. Then again, it shows how difficult IndyCar is. There aren't instant, easy answers to unlocking performance in IndyCar every single weekend. Joseph Newgarden shows us that. He's as good as you can get, and he's terrible sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a surprise to me too at times. How can Andretti, how can Colton Herta go nearly 2 years? As good as he is, how can he go that long and not win a race? In a way, that just shows you how difficult IndyCar is.
And it shows you the depth of the talent in the field at large that we have now, which is really impressive.
Yes, it does. I just wish we had a superstar.
It's true. There's no one really that like stands out. Literally, it's like because anytime I'm asked who's your favorite IndyCar driver, I don't have one name on top of my mind. I have like a group of people I think of that I admire. It's interesting.
You've got a slew of names. Nobody has any idea who they are. And this happened about 15 years ago when I wrote a story about the Indy 500. I said there's on the whole grid, there's 5 full-time American IndyCar drivers. And it happened to be the lowest attendance of the Indy 500 for decades, because I think people need to be emotionally attached to particular drivers. And right now we got a bunch of great guys who nobody knows and nobody cares about. So IndyCar are right on the cusp of a lot of people not really caring, because there's nobody that captures their interest. Colton Herta almost became that guy, but then he fell off in performance. Joseph Newgarden, as great as he is, hasn't become the American hero yet of IndyCar. You know, like an Unser, like a Mears, like an Andretti, nothing like that. We don't have that guy coming through yet. And so that's a bit of a concern for me, that IndyCar is just, it's good racing and it's good cars, but you know, where's that human drama story that I want to I want to get latched onto.
On the subject of teams themselves, Ganassi and Penske, it usually a lot of years it ends up being just the two of them trading the top, tier.
Yeah.
The thing that's amazing to me is that they're able to field teams of like 3, 4, and even 5 cars at a time, and still have success. And again, drawing on your study of extraordinary racing teams, to the layman, it's like, how are they able to do that week in and week out without succumbing to inherent complexities that would be involved with that, and in the inevitable internal competition that would occur?
Yeah. And not just week in, week out, year in, year out, decade in, decade out. And so I study these teams a lot. I love to look at it. So let's take the top 3 teams: Penske, Ganassi, and Andretti. Penske is what? Penske perfect, right? Black pants, black shoes, crisp shirt. Everybody knows exactly what they're supposed to do. Let's execute at the highest levels. Ganassi's got a completely different concept. Hire the best people, get out of their way. Let them do their job. I love that. Andretti has a different culture again. It's open door. We want everybody's input, and then we'll do the best we can. They're all successful. But Ganassi, I'm so glad Ganassi, after all these years, can still take the fight to Penske, because I still think Penske has more resources than Ganassi does. But Ganassi has an ability to pull the team together and focus on multiple drivers. Dixon, let's face it, Dixon will never be the success story dominant driver that he had been in the past. It's just nature. When you're in your 40s, the 20-year-old guys are braver. They don't have wives. They don't have kids. They're out to impress. And so Dixon is a brilliant driver. He'll still be good. He'll still win races, but he won't dominate like he did. But Palou is in there, and he is the Dixon. He certainly shows the ability to be the Dixon type driver of the years to come. And Ganassi has the ability to execute a structure within the team that is able to adjust to the environment that they're in. I think they strategically read races at the highest level, higher than Penske even, but they strategically read races at a higher level than I think any other team in IndyCar racing.
It's really cool to see you parse out the different strategies that those 3 teams have, because to the outside, I mean, maybe it has something to do with the fact that everybody's driving the same Dallara in theory. The impression that people have of IndyCar racing from the outside a lot of the times is it's a spec series, the cars must be all the same, but that's not really the case when you get down to it.
Well, it is and it isn't, remember, because they do all have the same cars.
Yeah.
But it's just, how do you manage and read the needs of the car and driver and execute in the decision-making process that allows that driver to have equipment that allows him to do stuff that other people can't do.
Yeah.
And that could be 0.05 of a second. And that's all it needs to be sometimes.
Well, maybe to finish up, you could tell us, you've already mentioned where you think the IndyCar series needs to go in terms of the star power of one or a couple of drivers that would help elevate it to, or help it transcend just being motorsport, and maybe more people would be interested. But if you had Roger Zier, what else would you say? What else do you think should be done as the sport evolves?
Okay, so you've just asked me my pet peeves, right? I'm going to let it fly here. Here's my letter to Roger. Dear Roger, you're creating one of the most confusing sports series in the world. I tune in, I see your driver, Joseph Newgarden, in the Shell car win the Indy 500. My 12-year-old son is there. He's jumping up and down. Daddy, Daddy, that's my favorite car. I want you to take me to the next race. I go to the next race. I look for Joseph Newgarden in the Shell car. He's not there. He's got some other funny color. I don't even see his helmet anymore. Okay, so then let's follow Pelot in the yellow DHL car. Great. Let's go watch him. I go to a race. He's not here. Where's my DHL car? What do you mean he's in a green car? What? Ah, Daddy, take me to the baseball game instead. It's the most confusing series. No driver turns up with the same helmet color scheme or the same color car any weekend. It's total. Can you imagine if the Dallas Cowboys suddenly allowed all their players to do whatever helmet design you wanted, whatever color scheme you wanted, right? It'd be total confusion. The NFL would ban it immediately. IndyCar marketing people have no understanding of the confusion they're building and what's going on. Okay, that's my pet peeve there, right? Second thing is we got to develop a sports hero here, and he has to be American. American people support their own, right? So the Olympics that are coming up, what programming do you think they're going to show the American people? The American people competing in the Olympics in France? Of course. Do you think NBC are going to focus on the Greek guys or the Spanish guys or the French guys? No. Why? Because we're emotionally attached to our guys. We want to see our guys. It's the same with IndyCar. Our guy needs to take on everybody from the rest of the world, kick the shit out of them and send them home. Now people are in the grandstands saying, yeah, you go get it. So there's two pet peeves. Also, encourage racing. Don't penalize every driver for every attempt to be a racing driver. We want racing. We don't want every driver penalized for every little thing he did trying to be a Pato Award and pull off a brilliant move. And that's a real fine line, but these are gladiators. Let's build them up again. Let's not just penalize them because he tried to outbrake somebody and he touched them. Avoidable contact. It is avoidable if you never try and pass somebody. We don't want to get like that. We don't want this clinical, white, predictable, non-racing type of scenario to come around and have people say, watch IndyCar and it's no good.
Those are all fantastic points, especially the one about the changing livery from race to race. You have to, it doesn't matter if you're someone who's never watched it before or if you're someone who watches it religiously, you need a spotter's guide every week that it's on, just because of the changes.
You shouldn't have to work hard to become a fan.
Yeah.
Right now, 12-year-old boys, Roger Penske will tell you his dad took him to the Speedway when he was 12 or 14 years of age. And boom, he was mesmerized. You take a 12-year-old kid now to the Indy 500, then go to the next race because you loved everything so much, you're totally confused. Your favorite car is gone, your favorite color, your favorite driver, you can't work it out. It's all mixed up jungle. So one of the best drivers in IndyCar right now is Scott McLaughlin, right?
Yeah.
So he comes over. He's from Australia, New Zealand, Australia. He comes over and he's in a different color car every week. He's in a different helmet every week. He has zero brand, whereas they should have had an Australian guy who's coming over to take on our guys. And our guys are going to go after him. And the same color scheme. So when the helmet that he wears is the same color and the onboard camera comes on, you know exactly what car he's driving. Right now, it's total confusion. He's in the yellow Pennzoil car. What's even worse is on television, right? The introduction of the drivers on television broadcasts will have Scott McLaughlin in a yellow Pennzoil suit. He's not even wearing it in that race weekend.
Yes,
whatever. The confusion.
Yeah.
Where are the marketing geniuses for IndyCar to not understand we're creating confusion in the sports marketplace, particularly for the 12-year-old, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds who we want to capture because we want them to be part of our sport for the rest of their lives.
I think you hit on something really critical, though. With the design of the cars as they are now, you don't see the helmet. You can't. So you can't identify. I remember when I was watching F1 back in the day as a kid, and I could identify the drivers by the helmet scheme.
Exactly.
Oftentimes, that's all you had to go by if they were switching teams. You couldn't even see the number. But you can't even go by that now because of the aero screen. You can't see the helmet. So the livery of the car is even more critical. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Okay, there's my pet peeves.
Well, this has been a fantastic talk. I mean, I knew that you were going to have a lot of brilliant insights based on having watched you on TV, but it's really great. And I really hope that we see Connor back in a car on a regular basis very soon, because I saw him at Indy. I was walking behind the pit lane, and he was out there, shaking hands with people and taking selfies and everything. He seems like a really, really cool guy. Understands that part of being in the sport is being an ambassador for that sport.
Exactly. He loves Indy. He loves the sport, and wherever he ends up, that's the way this stuff flushes out. You end up where you're supposed to end up. And he does a lot of great media stuff. Like yourself, got the podcast going, has access to almost everybody. And so he loves the sport no matter what end of it he's involved in. Yeah.
Well, we'll be keeping our eyes peeled to see if he has more opportunities going forward. So Derek, your own speaking engagements, if somebody wants to get into contact with you to have you speak at their event, where should they go?
DerekDaly.com.
Well, there
very
you go.
simple. Right on my webpage, DerekDaly.com. All the details are there. There's a link to my YouTube channel, which has got a whole slew of things about of me doing corporate presentations, doing television, doing interviews, with people like Patrick Dempsey or Letterman or Stallone. So I've captured a fair chunk of it there, because whenever a client is trying to decide on a speaker, the one thing they have to decide is he a safe speaker? Will he get me in trouble? Is he so far out there that we would get in trouble? So you try and give them a broad spectrum of who the person is, what the character is, and I think you can capture that in video, in many ways, and a lot of that stuff is evident on my YouTube channel, which again is Derek Daly. I don't know what's called Derek Daly. Derek Daly channel on YouTube will get you there.
All right. Well, I can't thank you enough for making the time for us today. This has been really entertaining, and I hope that you have a great rest of the summer, and wish you continued success.
Great. Thank you, Jason. Anytime. Thank you.
Yeah. And so for Derek and myself, so long. We'll see you on our next podcast. Everyone, take care and be safe.